Welcome to Stageworthy. I'm Phil Rickaby, the host of this podcast. This is episode 322. Stageworthy is a one-person operation, so not only do I arrange the guests, I edit the show, I promote it, I even created the music that's running under what I'm saying now. I also shoulder all the financial responsibilities that keep this show going, so if you enjoy this podcast, please consider supporting it. There are a few ways that you can do that. First off, if you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a 5-star rating. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can also leave a review. Those ratings and reviews help new people to find the show. If you want to keep up with what's going on with Stageworthy and my other projects, you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to philrickaby.com/subscribe. And you can also leave a tip for the show by dropping some change in the virtual tip jar. I will put a link to that in the show notes, which you can find on the website or in your podcast app. But really, one of the most important things you can do, even more important than ratings, reviews, or even financial support, is to share it on social media. Even a retweet helps. You can find Stageworthy on Twitter and Instagram at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website with the archive of all 322 episodes at StageworthyPodcast.com. And if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby, and as I mentioned, my website is philrickaby.com. My guest this week is Crystal Lee. Crystal is the production and technical manager at Why Not Theatre and the co-founder of What by When, a production firm that advocates for cultural and environmentally sustainable production and technical practices in the theatre industry. Originally from New Brunswick, Crystal has worked in technical theatre and management across Canada. Here's our conversation. Just to jump into things, could you?
Yeah.
One of the things that I want you to describe what you do at Why Not Theatre. Tell me what a production and technical manager is.
Well, it's I think the simplest term is just a production manager, but because there is no one else who's sort of accountable for production and technical departments at Why Not. We're a relatively small organization. I think we have about 12 full-time folks now who've joined us in different departments now. We have a marketing department, which was not something that Why Not had pre-pandemic. So
hey, that's pretty nice. It's good to have.
It is. Yeah. It's good to have someone like be on social media and like understand all the like style guides of what Why Not is. I'm certainly noticing an impact. And I like to think that, having someone full-time as a production person on the Why Not team is also effective. I'm essentially a production manager, but I oversee all production and technical aspects going into projects. Why Not has a very interesting, or maybe I would say like interesting. Everyone uses interesting as if it's like, oh, that's interesting. But really, this is more like unconventional. And I really love the way Why Not categorizes the work and the priorities that they do. So I'm just basically the point person for the execution process of all of that. Yeah.
One of the things that the whole production side, the technical side, for a long time has been a boys' club.
Yeah.
And I know, that's changing. I think the leadership, though, is largely a boys' club. How do you see in your day-to-day, how do you see that production leadership and the technical side changing that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's a question I get a lot in the industry. And I actually really enjoy answering it because I really believe in the growth that's happening on my side of the industry. How do I see that growth, I guess? Is that what the question was?
I mean, you could take it however you want. I mean, the thing is that I think, it's been somewhat stagnant. Like when I've looked backstage at a number of productions, there's a long list of male names there. And
Yeah.
that's sort of a legacy of both misogyny and the history of how people fell into that side. But I know it's changing. I'm seeing a lot more both female and non-binary names come out in there. So we do see the change. I'm just curious about how you, like, do you think it's moving at an appropriate pace, or would you like to see it faster? What's that journey been like from where you sit?
Yeah, I guess I have a personal experience with that question. And then I would say removing myself, not entirely, but removing myself from my own lived experience and like seeing the changes. I would say there is growth, and I think sometimes maybe it's like behind closed doors almost, or not behind a curtain, if you will, where it's like a particular aspect of the industry is maybe seeing more growth than other aspects. I would say institution, you'll see a lot of like union members who are still within that old guard, maybe that same sort of, archetypal like crew person who once was a roadie, so to speak, and then, has moved on into like larger houses. I've spent some time like very early in my career working in larger houses. I worked at the National Arts Center for a while. And I think in my experience there, I only really saw a handful of women identifying crew leads. And then during my time there, which was about 5 years ago, they had brought on a head of props who was female. And that was a huge difference in leadership, and I think a huge difference in how people saw leadership, particularly in that context. So that was a very positive change. And I think I'm seeing more and more of that kind of pop up all over the place. In the indie world, I think there are a lot of, female non-binary women identifying production managers, technical directors. There are, also some other marginalized communities that lack representation within that field, but slowly but surely it's happening. I would say it's happening more for bringing up more representation in gender than it was before. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like indie often leads the charge in a lot of ways. Like what sort of happens in indie eventually finds its way moving up towards the more established theaters. And so I'm hoping that this is the kind of thing that sort of like trickles upwards a little bit faster.
I hope so too. And I believe in indie and its lasting impact. I know a lot of, suppliers who are now, I don't know, once, did that fun Shakespeare in the Park as a carpenter and is now like leading a major shop in town, still has an indie heart, and they like provide discounts and they provide resources and they provide mentorship. Like it really does feel like there's a lot of camaraderie. There's camaraderie everywhere in theater, but for some reason, like indie, knowing that we're all kind of, in it together, whether it's part of your job description or not, like you want to see the thing happen because that it has value, the project has value, your teammates have value. You're not in it for the money, so to speak. And yeah, that impact kind of stays with you. I like to think it certainly lasted with me now that I'm in a full-time position. I want to find ways of, offering resources and offering clarity and mentorship where I can.
I think mentorship is one of those things that is so important in the industry, especially where leadership is concerned, just generally. And it's something that I think for a long time we haven't seen much of, or at least it wasn't really easy to find. And I think that we are seeing more mentorship. Did you have mentors that sort of like helped guide you and give you advice along the way?
Yeah, definitely. And I think mentorship is a two-way street. So a lot of my mentors also had that agenda as well. They were like, you have a lot of value, whether that being your gender or your race. I'm a mixed race, Asian person, Chinese person, and my parents are immigrants. And, to have that sort of like, I don't know, experience that I bring to the table within my own leadership style or expectation. That was a big learning for a lot of my mentors that I had. Both of my mentors are mostly, I would say, like white presenting. Oh, there we go.
We're okay.
One second. Oh, hilarious. Yeah, so those mentors, always wanted to, I guess they were more collaborators than they were like full mentors, if we want to say it that way. Like, it was just a very collaborative experience. I had things to talk about and they had things they wanted to share with me. And they've stayed with me throughout my career. My first mentor, his name is Paul Delmotte, from New Brunswick, which is where I'm originally from. And he's the one who actually brought me into theater. He was the one who said, let's spite all of these men who think that you can't do what you do and let's show them. And that was like very inspiring, to have someone who, is widely accepted in that side of the industry, and to endorse me to be a leader in that community meant a lot to me. So yeah, we touch base every now and then. And then after I went to theater school, I did my internship at the National Arts Center, where I met Spike Line. And Spike, such a funny, like, scary name for a mentor. Spike. Spike was my mentor. Yeah. He, was also extremely collaborative, like really looked out for me. Never made me feel like I was othered, which is like not the experience I had with other folks of that age bracket or that knowledge, institutional knowledge. So yeah, to this day, like, Spike and I call each other every now and then, and shoot the shit. And
nice.
Yeah.
Where in New Brunswick did you grow up?
I grew up in what they call the armpit of the province, just because of the shape of where it is. But northern New Brunswick, a small place called Bathurst.
Okay.
About population 16,000 people.
I was just wondering, because I know there's several parts, depending on where you're from, that might be referred to as the armpit of New Brunswick. So.
I think I don't think it's like stinky or like sweaty in any way. I think it's just like in the arm of.
Yeah. No,
I don't know. Who knows why they call it that?
Yeah. So in New Brunswick and growing up there, what was your first introduction to theater, and how did you find your way to the technical side?
Yeah, it was a journey. I met up with an artistic director the other day for a show that I'm sort of involved with. And he was like, I resent that you're from the Maritimes. And I like, don't know what that means, but I guess it means, like to be, I don't know, involved in what we might identify Toronto as like the hub, of arts and culture of Canada. I don't know. Theater for sure. Or at least that's how I saw it when I was in the Maritimes. I think this AD was like, how did you get here? And I've been thinking a lot about this question, like, how did I get here? When I was young, I would say I was very interested in the magic of it all. And I think maybe the stereotype is that you're like so engulfed in the magic, but I was like, oh, magic is cool, but like, how do you do that? It's not magic. It's like there has to be some logic to it. There has to be like, how do I execute that magic? So I will say I was very like type A and like really understanding how one does a cool effect that can be masked as something like theater. So I saw the Velveteen Rabbit, and the magic in that show was not magic at all. I think it was a scrim that came down in the front of the stage, and the way they played with lighting to animate the rabbit, from the stuffed animal to like the character, was really mesmerizing. And so that was really interesting for a long time. After I graduated from high school, I stayed in New Brunswick. I went to a university called Mount Allison University in Sackville, which maybe we could consider it the knee of New Brunswick. I don't know, like the toe. It's like sort of more south of New Brunswick. Also a very small town. I think population there was 5,000 people, and that's like with the population of the university.
Right.
A lot of like, black box theater, studio theater. I was an actor there for a little while. I really enjoyed acting. I really just enjoyed the camaraderie of like being backstage and like, being with, finding your network and being with pals and commiserating together. But I also was really, I was really good at pointing out mistakes for the backstage crew. So I was the one who was like, I have notes. I have notes about glow tape. I have notes about how I was dressed today. I have notes about this. I have notes about that. So clearly my mentor, Paul, who I mentioned earlier, saw this and wanted to hone it into, reframe it into something maybe a little bit more practical for me. He suggested that I apply for this job in Parsboro, Nova Scotia, at a decommissioned ship that then became a theater called Ship's Company Theater. He told me to apply for the head tech position, which seems wild. I was an actor who like just had a lot of production notes to give. And he suggested I apply for the job. I did. The person who interviewed me was like, do you know how to hang a light? I was like, no. And he hired me anyways.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a great learning curve. I learned so much. I was in the middle of nowhere in Nova Scotia. I had a really great team. I think my carpenter was from Toronto. So she was also, another great female leader, I think, early in my career. She was a badass, and I wanted to be like that. I also had a couple friends with me who like were stage managers on this gig as well. So I guess I had a lot of like passion for being with these people and working on these shows and like having agency in the technical world. And my curiosity just, spiked, and I like wanted to learn more about electrics. I wanted to know more about like carpentry. I wanted to know more about adhesives for some reason. Like I had all these bizarre curiosities that just came out of this experience. And then when I got back to university, Paul and I had a great conversation about what my next steps what I wanted to do as my next steps. And he provided some more resources. And then I kind of like reframed my degree a little bit to do more of the technical management side of things. After that, I actually took a different approach. I got a job in administration, in education, actually, at a roadhouse. So I was involved in like bringing in all these clients and all these artists who came from mostly Toronto and BC, I would say, who would come in and they would do a show and also provide ancillary programming. So my job was to like, provide or like coordinate workshops that were given to marginalized communities in Fredericton. So, we would have an Indigenous dance troupe come, and then we would like provide dance workshops with Indigenous communities in New Brunswick, which was really lovely because at the time, New Brunswick's education system was like really not arts forward. It was not considering arts as like a priority, and so it was cutting a lot of funding in that way. And I guess like I had another passion kind of spike from that, and that was really figuring out how to broaden the scope of access for the arts. Yeah.
That idea of cutting the arts, that's something that's, I think, been happening more and more in North America.
Yeah.
The idea that this strange idea that the arts are just for the elite. They're just for rich people. It's like, it's not important. We don't need to worry about it. We can just sort of get rid of it as we cut theater programs and music programs and art programs and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, we just look, at Europe and England and other places where these are things that are like funded and people see them as important. So important that, like, if the government was to talk about cutting them, people would be very upset about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it has been pretty tough, I would say. Being on the being a maritimer and experiencing that was a different experience than coming to Toronto and seeing that. Also, I went to school in Montreal, and I would even say, like, the French, the structure for funding for the French arts is different than on the English side. And within that there is white supremacy, and within that there is like inequity. I really enjoy working for culturally specific companies, but I am saddened by the fact that a culturally specific company can only be a culturally specific company in order to qualify for funding sometimes. Like, it's not like they could do, I don't know, like Romeo and Juliet that didn't include some sort of narrative on, social justice or racial justice. So, yeah, I kind of went on a tangent.
That's too bad, because I think there's a lot of companies that would do some really amazing work just with the play, without having to feel like they had to add anything else. But
100%, yeah, it's so true. And I think these companies, they're really driven by the mandate of like making sure that there is representation. But I just think all companies should have that mandate. Like, I don't know why we have to have culturally specific companies kind of leading that change, as opposed to everyone just doing that, and everyone doing all the kinds of Romeo and Juliets that they want to.
Yeah. I have this idea, this theory that a lot of times companies spend a lot of time honing their grant applications and trying to fulfill what they've stated for their mandate through that. And that just sort of like filters into this very literal way into the productions that they're doing, and maybe is not as, I don't know what the word is. I think some people get a little too stuck on how they're writing their grants. That's just me.
I think that's definitely true. And I think, these days I'm kind of advocating for, I want to say something I probably made up, and then just I've made it up with such confidence that it's become law kind of thing. Like, I often advocate for production management dramaturgy, which is just an opportunity to like sit down with an artist. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be production. It can be like, maybe you are doing something culturally specific and want to engage in like a consultant who can really speak for that. And how do we open up, the process of grant applications and building what that is a little bit more in line with what you want your project to be, so that costs can reflect and values can reflect better. Yeah. I would love to see a world where that is more normalized. Yeah.
Sort of a bit of a tangent, but I think it's related. Years ago, it was out for Nuit Blanche. I remember going out for Nuit Blanche, and I remember, you go through Nuit Blanche, and a lot of times you're going through the program, and you're trying to figure out what the thing that you're going to see actually is, because it's sort of a description that's like, it talks about what it represents, and all these really symbolic meanings and stuff, and you never really know what it is. And then one time I came across this installation somewhere that somebody had done, and they had constructed like this house structure, and they put lights on it, and they put some balloons on it. And I was like, okay, so tell me, what does this mean? And they said, I just thought it would be cool to put lights and balloons on this thing.
Oh my gosh. Art
And
for art's sake.
I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if we could just say, I thought it would be cool to do this thing. And people would be like, that sounds cool. Do it.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess you're saying that like in a way we're almost, not that we're fudging anything in a grant application, but like the ideas aren't really distilled enough to like.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes they're esoteric and you know, the excitement is, I thought it would be cool to put a balloon and lights on this thing rather than sort of like, you know, I thought that the symbolism of this, you know, that's sort of like art speak.
Yeah, it's so true. You know, here's another tangent that I'll throw.
Yes, please.
Just because I really live in this curiosity of like, what is art? What is music? You know, what is dance? What is movement? Mm-hmm. On top of, you know, trying to pursue this acting career or this acting degree in university, I also did a degree in music composition, and my specialty was 20th century atonal music, because I loved this philosophy of like, what is the difference between music and sound? Is sound music? Is like music a collection of sounds? What is that? And so some of my favorite composers, I mean, I guess in the atonal world, this is a pretty like basic one, but John Cage, you know, did this amazing piece called 4:33, where it was 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And he like notated, he made charts for an entire symphony to just sit there and do nothing for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And you know, watching this, it was televised once on BBC, and I watched the televised version, and the audience interaction to that was so interesting because of this like narrative of like, this is pretentious art.
Right.
Like, we have to sit in the audience and like hold our breaths and like experience silence for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And then in between the movements, that's when we can shuffle out of our chairs and, you know, sneeze and cough and clear our throats and do whatever we do. And then as soon as the baton goes back up, that's when we all hold our breath and like really intently look at the symphony doing nothing for another, you know, a minute and a half. Just very interesting about how we perceive art. And I guess maybe this goes back to like the access of like, where art is produced and how it's produced and how it's marketed and who goes to see the art, you know?
Yeah. I find, you know, we're in an industry where it's one of the only industries in the arts where somebody says things like, I saw a play once and I didn't like it, so I don't do theater, right? You know, and occasionally people talk about how expensive it is. And it's like, well, that's only if you're going to certain theaters. Like there's so much more out there. But trying to break down these ideas that it's hard to find or it's inaccessible and or just expensive, just like there's so much more than what people think it is.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I, you know, to go back to indie, I think indie is really pushing what that convention can and can't be. You know, I think it's sometimes nice to like, you know, go to the Princess of Wales Theater and like really experience theater in maybe that bougie kind of way. There's definitely like some value in doing that. There's also value in, you know, going to a pop-up or like a nuit blanche and not really knowing what you're going to expect and paying absolutely no money and, you know, going to see weird art. Like, I love that. There's a project that Why Not is doing that I'm production managing right now, called Mashup Pondy Road. And it's sort of like this, I don't know if you're familiar with Caravana, like the festival. Yeah. So it's very Caravana inspired. It's going to be opening up in Little Jamaica. And one of the great things I love about working with Why Not is that we're often partnering with other companies in town who, you know, may not have the full resources of an organization. So my producer and I are going to be the like technical and producing support on the project and steward them financially as well. And part of the mandate of this project is to like not reach the audiences that would go to the Princess of Wales Theatre. And that's like no shade on Princess of Wales theaters or those audiences, but like, how do we access people who don't know anything about theater?
Yeah.
Or like have never been to the theater, or may have barriers to going to the theater, whether that's cost or whether that's location or not knowing how to. And so something that I've like never really experienced as a production manager is like being a part of those conversations of like what it means to go into space and not colonize it, go into space and like actually have ambassadors who are like welcoming you in and buying into your work because they know it will animate their community in a way that maybe it hasn't been animated before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm just like right now in my journey, like post-pandemic, understanding the nuance of like what production and technical can be outside of maybe purely execution of projects. It's actually, there's a holistic project or process to the project that, collaborates with other members of communities that we want to reach. So yeah, having lots of fun with that.
Is that something you explored more over the pandemic?
Yeah, I would say I got really into advocacy over the pandemic. Generally within my branch of the industry. I think, the murder of George Floyd sparked a lot of conversations around racial inequities and social justice and going back to leadership and being a woman of color in a leadership role, whether that is, middle management or not, like I do have agency and I do have influence and I do have a lot of privilege too. And so like, how do I use my voice in, a small way, but hopefully impactful in process to make a difference? And so, yeah, I started thinking a lot about like, particularly in my experience with indie, there's just a lot of burnout. There's a lot of like not great livable wages.
Yeah.
And, you talk about mentorship and how indie is a huge access point to like getting your first mentor or getting, your first job out of school. So why is it that we're burning people out so early in the game if we know that there's a demand for it and we're not like investing in the industry, So I started asking a lot of these questions, and production management is also a very like siloed, very lonely job. I never work with other production managers. I'm just working alone, leading other people and hoping that I'm doing the right thing. So yeah, I started thinking a lot about like advocating a lot for process over product. I think, a lot of folks really just want to get to opening night, like the show must go on. We've got to get there. And then once we get there, once we survive this, we'll be happier. And I thought about how much that really was a bummer. Like, I just don't want to be here to survive the process. That sucks. Like, I want to be here because like y'all are my friends and you're my team. And like, I trust you and I'm having a great time executing the show. And then I'm happier during opening night because I know that I haven't like burnt anyone out or, got into any fights with anyone in the process. Like everyone is happy and feeling supported and wants to do this again. And so that just became, I guess, a mission that I had over the pandemic about like, what are the systemic issues that keep people from having a good time in the process? Is it like the lack of understanding of what we do? Is it the lack of time? Is it, again, going back to granting, like, is it not knowing enough information about how we want to budget shows or how we might want to pay people or what resources we need? So yeah, I had a lot of questions.
Yeah, no, it's that idea of surviving the process to get to opening night, I think is probably one of the worst habits I think that sometimes we have, because the process is what gets us there. We don't just like the process is such an important part of getting to the opening, right? To creating a show. And if we're just concentrating on surviving it, just getting through it, then what are we really accomplishing in the process?
Totally. And I think, that's a bit of maybe a hang up from previous generations of doing this kind of work. I know it was a big theme in theater school for me. You know, I went to National Theater School, and I know since a lot of those conversations came up, they've started to change what the structure of, you know, having a bit of time to breathe and like make better health choices. I know that's more of a conversation there. But when I was there, you know, I think culturally there were 8 of us in a class, and I know that we all wanted to prove ourselves. And we were also a batch of, I think there were six women, women identifying, one non-binary person. And we were all very competitive. Like it was this weird, like wanting to prove yourself as a woman or like wanting to prove yourself as a person of color, like wanting to, I don't know, prove yourself as a queer person. Like there was just all these like identities, like trying to prove ourselves to this like this idea of like we are just as good as the generation before us who like pushed those boxes and you know, were twice our size and stayed up all night and like you know, that sort of like archetype, I guess.
Yeah,
a stereotype, I don't know. But yeah, there was certainly a culture of like, if they needed to go eat a sandwich during their break, wow, they are not cut out for this. And that's extremely unhealthy. And so I started to see that, like I started to engage in that sort of culture when I was in Toronto as well. Like I know I was like working way above what I was being paid to do. You know, I started volunteering my time. I started volunteering my resources. I like wanted to be the best that I could be and prove myself in the industry. And like, also I didn't know who I was competing with. So I was just blindly doing all this survivalist whatever to like make a name for myself. And I just don't ever want anyone to feel that they have to do that again.
Is it any wonder that people burn out in indie when, you know, the crew is set, the technical side is setting that example. The actors are working for who knows how much little, maybe nothing, maybe a box office split or something like that. And it's just like we ask so much of people and don't respect their time and their, you know, their pocketbook really. I mean, we throughout the industry as a whole, we don't pay people what they're worth. And we ask a lot of people. And in indie, we're really asking a lot. So it's no wonder that people burn out.
For sure. And I know that, you know, there's like 2 sides of that, right? Like there's the side that we just talked about earlier where there is passion there. And it's a great opportunity to like make connections and like sit in the shit with other people, you know, like your experiences come out of those moments. I know the biggest mistakes I've made were in indie, and I know that the biggest forgivenesses that I got were in indie. So I feel that and I value that. And I think that everyone understands what that value is. The other side of that is exactly what you're talking about. The burnout, the high demand, the not able, I guess the inopportunity for like taking a risk on someone who's new and providing them with structure and support so that they can not burn out. Like I guess like part of that advocacy is really trying to define like, what is it as an industry? What is it that we need as an industry collectively? Like, how can we standardize some things so that we all can knowledge share a little bit better so that we can all, you know, be more sustainable together, whether that's culturally or like environmentally? Like, do we all really need to put in our resources to build the same wooden riser over and over again so that it will just go to the dump? Like, you know, there has to be better structures in place to kind of like make I don't know, manifest some better like holistic values. I don't know.
I think, I mean, definitely that's all stuff. It requires coordination and communication. And I know a couple of times I've seen people try to start things like that. But of course, because there's no money and because it takes a lot of time, those things almost always fizzle. So somehow there's some kind of bridge in between to make those kinds of like links happen. Yeah,
100%. And, you know, I think part of I guess the thing that I'm sort of fighting for within production management and technical direction is working with other like-minded folks in the industry. We've like banded together as a collective. I feel like we're so like intimidating when I say that, but we're just a bunch of PMs and TDs who have come together and, you know, have also recognized that this is a problem in the industry. So we're starting to talk more and more about just breaking down someone's job and like, you know, getting more people in the room to advocate for certain things. Like recognizing blind spots. Cause I think it's easy for the industry to say like, oh, they're underpaying that person. Like don't associate yourself with this company because they don't pay people well. But it's actually not like, I doubt that it's actually like intentional. Yeah. I'd like to think that it's not intentional. Like I like to think it's just maybe a gap in knowledge because there is no standardization of like what my job is in Canada. Yeah. Or at least I haven't found one. You know, I cobbled a 6-page document from like multiple contracts that I've received in the past to like try and start the conversation of like, no, this is what's included in a production budget and this is what's included in like my job title. These are the things I'm not expected to do and you shouldn't ask me to do that, or you should compensate me more if you want me to do those things. Like, you know, just like allowing for more conversation around what these resources are so that we can properly give that wage or like allocate budget to it.
Now that group that you were talking about, is that What by When?
No, it's means of production.
Okay.
What by When is What by When is like also sort of within the same canon, I guess. My business partner and I, Wes Babcock, he's more of a technical director brain and I'm more of a production management brain. And I think sometimes people convolute those two roles and assume that they're the same. Yeah. So we kind of like within our own circles, we decided to say like, no, if you're going to hire me, you're going to hire me. And then you're also going to hire Wes and like, we'll be a collective and we will promise that your process will be so much better if you just if you invest in both of us. Right. And so since then we, I think we built a name for our like little partnership. We decided to create like a firm, I guess. And now we're advising a few companies in town, and we have 7 associates under us who like under this sort of mentorship idea where we like supervise them. They watch us start the execution process and then they follow through with it. So it just provides a little bit more structure for their learning. And then, and then we kind of get to, you know, be a part of the project and not suffer from FOMO.
Nice. Yeah. I'd like to change the subject slightly.
Yeah, sure.
Probably more than slightly. I know that you curl. You are a curler. Your sport of choice is curling. Yes. How did you start curling?
So I grew up in New Brunswick. And curling in New Brunswick is pretty big over there.
For a second, I thought that was going to be the whole story. So I grew up in New Brunswick.
And that's all we do there. Yeah, we just eat lobster and curl. No. There's more to it than that. No, I started, I needed a hobby. You know, it couldn't just be music. It couldn't just be theater. So my parents said, well, you can have your choice of 2 sports. They cannot be contact sports. They can either be curling or they can be golf. And I enjoyed curling more. Because it is more of a contact sport sometimes, depending on how intense you curl. Yeah. So
I remember when I was growing up, I think I recall, and you know, this will date me, but CBC during a certain time of year on Sundays would broadcast the Scots Tournament of Hearts.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
And my image, I mean, Olympic curling and watching people curl now, it is completely different from the images that I saw on TV back in those days when I was watching that. You know, it was all like dads smoking their cigarettes and all this sort of stuff. obviously that is not what necessarily what you saw in curling. What was that first time? Because I've curled since then, and it is actually, people think it's an easy sport, but it is actually quite strenuous. Is that something that surprised you? And how do you keep from one side of your body becoming stronger than the other?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Oh, it's like really refreshing to not talk about production management sometimes, I'll say. So thank you for asking this. In my experience as a curler, I was on the junior women's team in Bathurst. And what that meant was we were in the running to qualify for the Canada Winter Games, which was very exciting. So we had a team, we had like a marketing sponsorship. We, had the cool jackets. We were very cool in school with our like jock jackets, our jock curling jackets. We did end up qualifying for the first round, and then we lost, unfortunately, the second qualifier. So we didn't end up going to the Canada Winter Games. But the training process and all of that was quite rigorous. Typically, a curling season is, I would say, like maybe late October, November to March. So we were obviously on the ice that whole time. And in the off season, we were running track. We were like training. We were on a specific diet. And then I guess like the strengthening, when you say like strengthening of one side of your body versus the other, do you mean like the kicking off is? I
mean, because a lot of it seems to be like you kick off, you've got like one arm that tends to hold the rock, that sort of thing. At least the couple of times that I've done it, that is.
Yeah, it's true. There is a bit of an imbalance there. I would say, my right leg was probably a bit stronger than my other. It wasn't like noticeably like, oh, wow, she's a curler. Like, look at her right leg. It wasn't like that by any means. But there was a lot of like, I guess, full body strengthening throughout the year to maybe help with that. My role particularly on the team, I was the third, which meant I was the mate. I guess you call me the mate or the third. And my job was to like smash through all the rocks.
Right.
It was really awesome. So my kick was like much stronger than the two other women who went before me. So maybe I had a beefier right leg than everyone else on the team. Yeah, now that I think about that.
That's awesome. I always liked the idea of curling, and both times that I've had the opportunity to do it, I really enjoyed it. When I was a lot younger, I thought to myself, listen, if I ever decided that it was time to go to the Olympics, the only option I have at the age that I'm at is curling.
Yeah, it actually becomes, I think, more of a casual sport the older you get.
Yes,
too.
yes.
You can bring your beer on the ice, and like there's this like weird drinking culture around curling, which is maybe not seen in like squash. I don't know.
Probably not. I know that the Weaker Thans never immortalized the drinking after a squash game in song.
I don't know. I don't squash. My right leg is too beefy for squash.
Perfect. I know you're also you love to cook. Is that something? Because you know what, I only recently, as a human person, decided that I was gonna like learn to cook. I spent far too long in my life, like pulling down like pre-made dinners and eating out and ordering in and all that sort of stuff. And my girlfriend actually inspired me to cook. Is cooking something that you've always done, or is that something that's more recently become a passion for you?
Yeah. I think like anyone, like as soon as you become a quote unquote adult, you have this like, oh shit moment where you have to like take care of yourself. So I would say that naturally occurred in my 20s when I was in university. And I grew up in a household. My stepdad is Mauritian, and my mother is from Hong Kong. And so we, in Bathurst, New Brunswick, the only immigrant family there, I guess at the time, we were eating some pretty like some different cuisines than what my friends would see. And it just became like a very, I would say, like connected me with my culture and with home. Yeah. So my family also came to Canada because my grandfather started a Chinese restaurant in the East Coast. So I have this love of wanting to, I don't know, pay tribute. Is that really silly to maybe make a connection to? Like, I feel like I want to pay tribute to my Cantonese culture through food. And you know, I don't speak the language as often, and I'm not embedded in the cultural practices of what my grandmother practices. So I think food, first of all, Chinese food is delicious, very easy to make, very improvisational. So I would, if you're having a hard time like getting into it, I would really recommend, you know, doing a lot of stir fries and things like that. Hot pot, it's a great communal sort of meal to do with friends. Yeah, it always felt really comfortable to kind of get out of the busy work and kind of like meditate over making a fun improvisational bowl. I make this thing sometimes called garbage bowl that my partner and I call it. It's just like whatever is in the fridge and we need to make into a stir fry. So garbage bowl has become a huge staple in our household.
Is there a particular comfort food, something that you make when you're like, I really feel like it's like a cold winter night, or I'm tired, or I just need that feeling of home? Is there a particular thing that you make or order in or go out to eat?
Yeah, I think different categories of comfort food, right? Maybe different seasons of comfort food. Lately, I mean, I'm in my 30s, but my partner and I have been into like the TikTok trends of food, of what's out there. So we've been playing a little bit around like some of those trends. I would say like the comfiest thing for me, and something that I've actually integrated back into my work practice, is a hot pot. So I don't know if you're familiar with what a Chinese style hot pot is. Yeah. So it's very communal. I think it's very like, you know, it's accessible to folks who have different dietary restrictions, because you can, you know, separate what is getting cooked. And so, yeah, this is something that I'll do. It's also very easy. You just chop a bunch of like raw vegetables and throw it into a pot and drizzle some sauce on it and call it a night. And I started doing this as like a means of getting everyone together before we hit Tech Week. So I would bring my portable hot pot machines. We'd, you know, go to my place or go somewhere with a large table that could seat everyone on the production team, and we would just like share a meal when it was, you know, possible to do that and safe to do that. And it really just like kind of calmed everyone down. It got us out of, you know, the theater a little bit. It got us out of work. It got us out of the sense of urgency, and it just like let us have a moment together as a team before we hit the deck running. So yeah, I would say hot pot.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, two things that I miss, that I've missed desperately over the pandemic. One is going out for hot pot.
Yeah.
Second is dim sum, like going out for good cart service dim sum.
Yes.
Two things that I can't wait to get back to once I feel safe in restaurants.
Yes. Yeah. I think that time is coming. I think really I'm about to go to dim sum this weekend. So
oh my God. Okay.
Maybe I'll see you there.
So where is your dim sum spot of choice?
Okay, there's this really hilarious place up in Richmond Hill. It's right by my grandmother's house. So, you know, I think maybe it's just a favorite because it's in close proximity. But it is in this giant like convention center, like a banquet hall. Oh. And there are these like huge Renaissance paintings, and like everything is super Victorian and ornate. And then it's just like dim sum on cards.
Wow. That's awesome. That's
so
awesome.
In terms of a vibe, that's my favorite dim sum place.
Nice.
It's nice. Called, I believe it's called Premier.
Oh, one of these days I'll have to try it out.
Yeah, it's a vibe. Yeah.
Well, Crystal, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Phil. This has been great. I hope to see you either on the ice or around some dim sum carts.
Absolutely.